everybody, welcome to another spectral economics video today. Today I'm going to be looking at game theory again. Probably would have seen a video or two at the moment, but this time I'm going to be talking about something you might find a little bit interesting, especially if you're a wrestling fan. Got my wrestling t-shirt here, the John Cena and all. It's what I like to call triple threat. So what do I mean by triple threat? It's quite interesting. So you're probably thinking triple threat wrestling match or whatever, right? So it could be, 3 wrestlers in a ring, got to beat each other up, and whoever gets the pin gets the victory, right? Over one of the other 2 wrestlers. Doesn't have to beat both of them, just needs to beat one of them. Or you can have the same with tag teams, right? They fight it out, and whichever tag team, maybe there's a ladder match, maybe they're climbing up, they're pulling down the belt. So there's about 3, so it's, in a sense, in theory, it's 1 versus 1 versus 1. So you've got 3 opponents, 1 victory at the end of the day. But how do you exactly go about that, and what ways you go about it as well? It's a bit different as well if you have what they call a triple threat elimination match. I think there is as well. But anyway, we'll move off of that. That's just talking about wrestling, but this actually can apply in real life as well. So let's say you've got 2 people that are in a confrontation. They're going to have a fight. You have one really, really big, strong fella, as you can see here, and you've got another very weedy, weak fella. So I'm giving the big, strong fella a 90% chance of winning, and I'm giving the weak, weedier fella only a 10% chance of winning. Probably looking at those pictures, he's probably got far less than a 10% chance of winning. So it looks like he's pretty much done for. How could he change his odds? How could he make things better for himself? And which is why I talk about triple threat. Ironically, he could actually make his life better by actually adding another player. And the inclusion of this player isn't to help him, well, not necessarily, but this person's actually entered it to win as well. So now you've got a situation, you've got a fight where he doesn't have to just beat the one big fella, he's also got to beat the other guy. And that guy isn't particularly strong either though, so he's somewhat similar to him. That's actually quite important, I'll mention later on. So now you've got a 3-way fight. So how does this work out that it could actually be in his favour? Now he's got to defeat 2 people instead of the 1. How is that better? I'll quickly explain. So if there's no cooperation whatsoever, it's every man for himself. Now I've assumed the second player has pretty much got twice the ability of our first weaker player. So when we worked it out, we gave him a 17% chance if it's all for all. And our weak player, his chances have fallen down now to just 8%. So you have 10% now. Now it's even worse, it's 8%, so it's clearly not happening, right? How about our strong guy? His chances now dropped to 75%. He's got another fella he needs to contend with. So he's still in a very commanding position, but chances of him losing is a bit high. So look at this under these circumstances. Actually, our weaker guy is actually worse off. But that doesn't have to be the case. What if these 2 guys teamed up together? And this is interesting as well, because we don't know the extent of how their capabilities will mix together, but we just made a quick assumption that if they could work together, they could actually have a 60% chance of defeating the strong guy. They could split their skills, it could come from 2 directions and stuff like that. If they're able to cooperate reasonably well, they've got a good relationship on that grounds, then they could team up and take him out. So the point of that is that they team up on him, so they can eliminate him. Now, that's not the typical triple threat wrestling rules, is whoever gets the first pin, but we changed the rules a little bit on this, so make it elimination. So he gets eliminated. So that would then just leave the 2 of them. So you got the new entrant, who's twice as strong, would say, as our initial weak guy. So you work that out. So he would have a 66% chance of winning a one-on-one, and our weaker fella has a 33% chance, or basically 1/3 chance of winning one-on-one with him. And when you actually work that out, so you get the 60%. So now you've got to basically, what is 2/3 of 60%? So our new entrant now has a 40% chance, because they have to get by the big guy first of all. And our weak guy has now got a 20% chance. So even though he's got 2 battles ahead of him, his chances of winning have gone up from 10% to 20%. So how does this look in the bigger picture? So now we've got our strongest opponent. He's got a 40% chance of winning, as we highlighted earlier. So he wins outright. He beats the 2 in one go. Boom, they're gone. So he's the winner. Whereas if it's the other 2, they have to eliminate him first and then face each other. But it seems like the odds are in their favour when it's 2-on-1. So it comes down to that individual battle. So our new entrant has a 40% chance of winning, which is actually the same as the tough guy. And our weaker player has got a 20% chance, so that is better than his initial odds and is starting to get closer to the players that are already there. So he's actually improved his chances of winning. But that's come with a certain criteria. It's not going to work every single time. So what happens if you got the strong guy and he is able to persuade the new entrant to team up with him? On that basis, I've assumed that now our weak fella doesn't go from just a 10% chance of winning down to 0. But safely assume that, because he was going to be dominated by the big tough guy anyway. So now I've got the help of the second guy, so it's a 100% win. But if he then goes against the big guy, then can isolate the new entrant, and his chances of winning are quite great. They're 80%. So in that scenario, it works out pretty well, doesn't it, for the strong guy to actually team up with the new entrant and then face him one-on-one afterwards. But it doesn't work out that well for the new entrant. And on that basis, the new entrant would probably not adopt that strategy, because the new entrant would be aware of those odds of confronting the bigger guy later on. So that's not the best strategy for him, therefore making cooperation with the weaker player the better strategy. So I put that out in a table here. So if it's a one-on-one confrontation, you're going to have the strongest guy winning. Well, 90% chance of winning. So that works out well for him. If it's an all-out fight, then his chances go down to 75, but they're still fairly good. So now we've got the decision between, do you have the strong guy versus a team, or do you have the strong guy teaming up with the weaker player? So that's going to come down to the new entrant, because I'm sure both of those players would want the teaming up. The strong guy would as well, because if he teams up with the new entrant, he ends up with an 80% chance of winning. So teaming up works for him. And it also works for the weaker player. If he doesn't team up, he's only got an 8% chance of winning. If he does, he's got a 20% chance of winning. So both of the players would want to team up and they want to cooperate. So now it comes down to the new entrant. Who does he want to cooperate with, or does he want to cooperate at all? So it's in a very powerful position. So as you can see, if he cooperates with the weaker player, he now has a 40% chance of winning. If he cooperates with the stronger player, he has a 20% chance of winning. And if he doesn't cooperate at all, it's only a 17% chance. So the worst scenario is no cooperation, and the best scenario would be to cooperate with the weaker player. And therefore that would be the strategy applied. And that will give him the best chances of winning. And that also gives the weaker player a much better chance of winning as well. 20% isn't great, but it's a lot better than 10%. So we've looked at a fairly weak new entrant. What if we looked at a new entrant that's almost as strong as our existing entrant? Does the strategy change at all, or is it the same? And that's going to depend. So what we've got here is we've got the new entrant. See him in his Green Bay Packers shirt, looks pretty tough. Given him the chances are slightly lower than our initial strongman, but still reasonably high. So the two of those in there, an all-out fight, that gives our weak guy a very low chance of winning now. You have to beat those other two. You'd have to hope that they tend to beat up on each other, so it gives them a 6% chance in this case. So what happens if he teams up with the new entrant, the new strong guy? So therefore, we've assumed now that they've got a really good chance of winning, because the two strong guys would come out pretty close, but with the help of the weaker guy, chipping in here and there however he can, giving him about an 80% chance of winning. So then he would have to face a new strong guy, and we've given him slightly better odds than if he was facing the other strong guy, but not particularly good. So it's about 12.5%. And the other strong guy, 87.5%. So on that basis, it doesn't look great. And then you've got to factor in the probability that they could team up and still lose to the other tough guy. And that actually reduces his chances of winning back down to 10%. So there's no gain from going from the initial scenario of 10% one-on-one with the triple threat of 10%. As well as our strong guy, the new entrant, anyway, he's got great chances. Even because he teams up with the weaker guy, gives him a great chance of winning. And also, he has a great chance of beating the weak guy one-on-one as well. So how does this all pay out? So we're going to look at it. So what's our new odds then? So our new entrant, 70% chance of winning. Great for him. Cooperating with a weaker guy works out really well. Our existing weak guy, it's still at 10%, but it's better than the 6%. So he'd probably still want to team up, but he wouldn't necessarily want him to enter in the first place. I think that's the key difference. And our first strong guy, because he's not getting any cooperation, is now dropped to just 20% chance of winning. So it really doesn't work out very well for him. So you'd rather this new guy doesn't enter. So let's have a look at the scenario now. So in this case, a 90% chance of winning. The strong guy doesn't want a new entrant, and the weak guy probably doesn't want a new entrant either, because there's no scenario where he's better off. It's an all-out fight. 6% chance of winning is worse. If the two strong guys team up, assuming he's got no chance, and even if he teams up with the stronger guy, he's got to fight the stronger guy after he's overcome the other strong guy in teamwork, which also gives him 10%. So in this scenario, it's not beneficial to have a new entrant, but the new entrant is in a very strong position of winning. In fact, the new entrant's got a better chance of winning than the existing strong man, even though he isn't as strong, because the weaker guy would not team up with the strongest guy, but rather team up with the second strongest guy. And because of that, you actually have a scenario where it's not best to be the strongest. It's actually better to be the medium, the middle guy, or the guy that's almost as strong, because your chances are much better because you're in a better position to actually cooperate. So what if the advantage of cooperation is less? So that's interesting as well. So we looked at putting in a stronger new entrant. Let's look at putting in a new entrant the new entrant doesn't work as well as we'd hoped with the weaker guy. Maybe they're not on the same wavelength, but they still have a good position. So we talk about a 70% chance of winning against our strong man, who's got a 30% chance of winning now. So again, we did the mathematics on this. It works out very well for the new entrant, because he's still got a 70% chance of winning the double team, so he's still got that advantage even though they aren't working so well together, and then he's got a very strong chance of beating our weak guy. But our weak guy, his chances are now just 8.75%, which is not very good. And our other strong guy, his chances aren't great either at 30%. So in this scenario, it's beneficial for neither of them to have the new entrant, which is quite interesting. Whereas our first scenario, we had a new entrant that is reasonably strong, maybe somewhere close to the middle, and they got great cooperation if they're working together. It works out quite well for the existing weak entrant. So we're going to go over now some of the conditions where actually having an extra player, the third player, the new entry, is actually beneficial to our weaker party. And when I talk about weaker parties, I'll talk about that in a minute, why that is so significant. So first off, the new entrant needs to be willing to cooperate with the weaker party. And for that to happen, the new entrant must see that teaming up with the weaker player is better than either operating independently or teaming up with the stronger player. As we find in almost all cases, it actually is better for the new entrant to team up with the weaker player. And it seems like the weaker player is also better teaming up with the second strongest as well. So a lot of times you'll actually see that fulfilled. The next one, there needs to be sufficient advantage of cooperating. And we've assumed mostly that there is an advantage of cooperating, just to a certain extent, but it's possible in reality cooperation may not yield great results. So that is also going to have an effect on whether you want that additional entrant in there. And of course you can have more than just one entrant, you can have several entrants, so it creates a little bit more strategy in there the more entrants you have in there, but it's quite interesting as well. Also, the new entrant must be weaker than the strongest player, and that's important as well. If you get a new entrant that is the strongest player, then it doesn't work teaming up with him, because what you get then is you teamed up with the strongest player to eliminate the previous strongest player, and you're left battling against a new strongest player, and your scenario is actually worse because you've got a worse opponent to face by teaming up with him. So you need to have your new entrant in a situation where they have to be stronger than the weakest, but weaker than the strongest. You've got somewhere in the middle for cooperation to be more or less worthwhile. Okay, so how do we come up with a scenario where we did? So in terms of the mathematics, what's required? So you need to, the joint probability of winning teaming up and then winning one-on-one has to be greater than the probability of taking on the initial strongman. As I mentioned before, you team up if they've got a very high probability of winning with a team. That's good, so that has to be then added. Then you add to that the probability of winning when you go one-on-one. So chances of winning against the weaker opponent should be sufficiently higher to cover the probability of losing and when you work as a team. So what we got here is we got combination. We got 60% times 33% gives you 20% chance of winning, and that is actually greater than 10%. So that's our first scenario. So that actual criteria has to hold in order for this system to work. And sometimes it will and sometimes it won't. So how does this apply in the real world? So this is what I'm going to get to now. And this is what's so important, is that you have a lot of strong firms out there, but it doesn't necessarily mean because they are the biggest and they're the strongest and they can just run over everyone else. What it means is that, sure, they have an initial advantage, but if there's enough competitors and if they're willing to cooperate, they can actually have a great outcome. I've got an example of here. This is in Italy. I have a hard time pronouncing this, so forgive me if I haven't pronounced it right, but I think it's the Mazan Valley in Italy. I'm sorry. I had it earlier. But anyway, yeah, so what they produce is, I think it's silver and brass cutlery, and there's many companies in there that actually produce that, and there are lots of small companies. I think if you actually look at statistics, I think there's one company for every 10 people or something, so there's a lot of small, and they actually all work together and all cooperating to actually have great outcomes, and they actually, through their cooperation, they're actually stronger than any large companies that can come in and actually beat them. Because of that cooperation, they're able to keep their prices low, keep their costs low, and keep efficient, and that is actually advantages of cooperating. So that's the whole point through this triple threat idea I got, triple threat theory I got, is that if you have strong cooperation between some of your weaker players, your strongest players can never really get too far ahead. So like I mentioned before, being the strongest player may actually put you in a far weaker position than if you're actually one of the weaker players, simply because you don't have that leverage for cooperation that the weaker ones do with each other because of those advantages. Another example as well is the digital nomads of Chiang, Thailand. I don't know an awful lot about this, but apparently there's lots and lots of small businesses, digital online businesses that are located up there, and they've actually got a community where they work together and help each other with their various products, and because of that cooperation, they're actually able to compete even with bigger companies, which is really good. And I think that's sort of an example of what I'm trying to get at with the triple threat theory. Alright, that takes me to the end of this presentation. Something a little bit unique, something that you're not likely to find in any sort of textbooks and stuff like that, but it's a way of looking at it from the weaker player's perspective when you look at a game, and how through cooperation you can actually end up in a better position, especially when we're talking about those in the mid areas, in terms of, you may not be the best or the weakest, but you have actual leverage to for cooperation with some of the other weaker players, and on that basis a lot of your stronger players don't have an awful lot of chance to win because of that cooperation. But like I said, it's very important that all the players are aware that working together is a way of beating the giants of industries and all that. And I think in the real world scenario that is often not the case, unfortunately, but potentially there is that capability for actual smaller firms to exist and actually be better off than the larger firms. Plus you've always got the added flexibility as well of a smaller firm. You can change direction a lot more easier than a larger firm. But anyway, that's food for thought. So if you liked this video, click the like button. If you want to see more videos like this, I'll be grateful if you click the subscribe button. I've got a few more game theory videos that are going to come out that you might be interested in as well, plus a few other things too. So you've got some economic basic concepts, look at demand and supply. I've got my conference papers, transport conference, a lot that's looking at cost-benefit analysis, and also I've got some stuff on vegan economics. That's something that I'm currently working on, which is, again, it's a new idea that I'm promoting that is quite interesting too. I've got a few videos on that. So again, if you want to know more about those, like I said, subscribe and you'll be aware of when those videos come out. Okay, thank you very much.